Saiyan Rose Goku Black.
It was a cloudy day. It seemed like it would start raining at any moment. Since it was midday, the group of girls and Goku were having lunch peacefully in the dining room while they talked and bothered the Saiyans and Kurumi, who were spending more and more time alone. The spirit of time would be so blushing that she wouldn't say anything in her defense, while Goku was the same as Tokisaki. But suddenly, a massive earthquake would begin to shake the high school, but they would realize that it wasn't just affecting the school itself, but also all over the world. Goku, Kurumi, and the spirits would be stunned upon sensing several powerful presences. Who the hell could they be? Mukuro would exclaim standing up. Nia would quickly kick her, which earned her a glare from the blonde. Shoo, she would finish, throwing a look at Toka and Sawa who were scared. Mukuro would understand what her friend wanted to tell her and remained calm. Just then, teachers and school staff entered to protect the students and tell them to remain calm. A new test has arrived, Kurumi would say seriously as she stood up and then turned her gaze towards Toka and Sawa as they were sitting next to each other. Toka, Sawa. Get out of here and call Mana, she would say seriously. What are you saying, sister? I couldn't leave without you, Toka would exclaim, refusing to leave. Kurumi would hug her sister and say, go and be safe with Aunt Mana, I couldn't forgive myself for losing you again, she would finish by letting go of her and then look at her best friend, P. Please take her, she would say while she began to tremble. Sawa would notice Tokisaki tremble and she was also made to see another Kurumi hugging her but she had white hair, at this she blinked and the albino Kurumi was no longer there. Okay, but when all this is over I want the truth, she finished and would take the Yatagami's hand. Let's go Toka-chan, she would say as she began to run pulling the minor. Wouldn't you forgive yourself if you lost me again, sister? Toka would think quite confused. You did the right thing Kurumi, now we have to go defeat those beasts. Natsumi would exclaim with a huge smile. Goku, the world depends on us, let's go defend it. The Saiyan would exclaim with a great sense of justice. So they all slipped away and went several blocks away. Along the way they would meet the other spirits and they all headed towards where on top of a building there would be 4 demons. Until spirits arrived, and, what are you? Lilith would ask looking at Goku. For their part, Kurumi and Lucifer stared at each other as if for some reason they knew each other and had a rivalry. My name is Son Goku and I belong to the Saiyan race, he would exclaim seriously. Saiyan? I don't know them, anyway, let's finish this quickly, Astaroth suggested while yawning. Belphegor without warning launched himself to attack one of the spirits, Yoshino, because of this Mukuro and Natsumi went after her help. Origami, Kotori and Mayuri would go against Astaroth while Goku and Yamai would go after Lilith leaving Nia and Kurumi against Lucifer. Tokisaki would begin the attack by firing several shots followed by an energy blast, then appear behind Lucifer and point one of her weapons at him. When will your goddess arrive? The demon lady would smile, sooner than you think, it's a shame you won't be eliminated by her, she would say as she began to laugh, last words. Kurumi be careful. Nia would exclaim. Tokisaki was distracted and because of this she was pierced by Lucifer's arm who would take out his arm and with him bring Tokisaki's heart. Kurumi. Nia would exclaim as she began to cry in despair, as a consequence of seeing her friend die she would begin to be surrounded by a dark aura. At the same time, Sawa and Toka were in a taxi, the brunette was talking to Mana who was on the way. But suddenly Toka would start breathing heavily. What's going on? Sawa would ask, alarmed, which also worried Takamiya. My sister. I don't feel her anymore. Yatagami would say between breaks while she squeezed her chest and tears began to come out. What do you mean? Sawa would ask, not understanding what they were saying to her. What's happening Sawa? "What's wrong with Toka?" he asked since he was listening. At that Toka would direct her gaze towards the brunette. "Something happened to my sister," she would exclaim while a purple aura began to surround her. "Sir, stop the car," she would order the driver. Sawa, for her part, had been shocked by the look Toka had given her and even noticed that her eye color had darkened. The car stopped and Toka got out and ran at a great speed that far exceeded that of the moving car. "Sawa," she left. Toka-chan came running back. "Get yourself safe, Sawa," Mana would finish, cutting off communication with the chestnut. Back in battle. Nia approached Kurumi's inert body and began to talk to her in search of some hope, but it had no result, so she dropped to her knees and a dark energy began to spread through her body. Lucifer would laugh sadistically as he observed his surroundings. The spirits were being annihilated as they could barely resist such overwhelming power from the demon lords, but he would be curious about that scion who was dodging all of Lilith's blows, something that only she herself could achieve. But at that moment he would realize that Goku was different because he had silver hair and emanated great power. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" Nia's screams made Lucifer turn to look at her and he became curious about her new appearance, even noticing an increase in power. "Let's see what you can do," the demon lady would comment. Nia clasped her hands and exclaimed, "Beelzebub!" And a book appeared. "Lucifer, what is that and why did it appear when I named her?" he asked curiously. But the now reverse spirit would take out a pen and write something in the book. When she finished and waited a few seconds, someone appeared above Lucifer and cut off his arm, then some rays of energy sent the demon lady flying. "Well done, Ellen!" Mana would exclaim, congratulating her friend. Mana-san?" Nia would ask, who was stunned since she had written that Lucifer would lose an arm, but she didn't expect it to be due to Takamiya's help. Ellen would still remain alert while tightly holding the spiritual energy sword/katana, since the power source of the suits was a cube which Mana divided into two crystals that would resist the power that had been given to her by Mio. Mana approached and saw the hole in her niece's chest. This made her angry and Ben got angry, so he went after Lucifer followed by Ellen. Nia would remain standing for a few minutes. Soon she ended up being surrounded by Lilith, Astaroth and Belphegor, the first being the one who had received the most damage. "I guess this is where it all ends. Sorry Kurumi," Nia would apologize, closing her eyes. "Lilith, don't worry, you won't be the last to die. I sense a great energy approaching." Nia opened her eyes in surprise and concentrated and managed to feel that familiar presence. "Toka," were her last words before losing her life. The minutes continued to pass. Mana and Ellen ended up being defeated by Lucifer, who, out of anger for having lost an arm, decided to use all his power on those humans. "Here she is," the demon ladies would exclaim when Toka arrived at the place, who possessed great power due to her constant contact with all the spirits and her determination to go after her sister and her attacker. But upon arriving and seeing everyone lifeless, the spirit would begin to invert, causing the multiverse to begin to tremble. Again, this feeling, she fell back into darkness. "Are you going to give up?" "I don't have the strength to continue." "In that case I'll take control." The demons began to attack Toka but would be expelled by a simple movement of her hand towards the sky. Belphegor and Astaroth launched themselves to attack her with a combined attack, but both were disintegrated by a small ball of energy. Now Lucifer and Lilith remained, who were sweating from Toka's power, which continued to increase every second. "This has gotten out of hand. How can this girl have this kind of power? Can she even rival Mirai-sama's?" Lilith would ask herself. "Eliminate everything," Toka would whisper as she looked emotionlessly at the demon lords and then raised an arm towards them and created a ball of energy. "Lilith, I guess it's over." Lucifer, dying for a being that could rival and surpass Mirai-sama, "I suppose it will be a worthy death," he would say with a small smile as he closed his eyes. At that moment, a huge explosion of white energy filled the place like a mist, and a figure could be seen approaching the three women. "Fufufu, we have here two ladies trembling with fear for a little girl," you would hear the voice of a woman with an elegant tone and at the same time as if she were speaking to inferior beings. "Who's there?" Lilith would demand an answer. Toka directed her gaze towards the figure that was seen approaching until she finally managed to see it. Lucifer, impossible. The white-haired girl approached Lucifer, who was stunned, under the gaze of Toka. Then the albino stood at the same level as the demon lord, who was kneeling, waiting for her turn. What's wrong? Do you see a ghost? Fufufu, he would ask with a smile as it distorted, and for a second Tokisaki Kurumi was seen. Lilith, Q, what kind of monsters are you and why do you emanate a power that even Mirai-sama would fear? Fufufu, I'm not a monster, I'm a spirit, she would say, making a white sword appear in her hand, and it would pierce Lilith's neck, who would fall on her back and begin to bleed and would try her best to keep breathing. Then she went to Lucifer and gave him a sinister smile. She stuck the sword in the ground and then took off the glove on her right hand. Lucifer, what are you going to do? Without further ado, the spirit stabbed him with her hand and tore out his heart. As he died, Lucifer watched as his murderer bit his heart and then spit it out. I'm sorry. Mirai-sama, were the last words of the two demon ladies. Now they were face to face, Kurumi and Toka. You look different from last time, why is that? The albino would ask while wiping the blood and remembering what she saw through Kurumi when Toka looked like a demon. But her sister wouldn't say a word, but would turn around and head somewhere else, so she would follow her out of curiosity. The two of them would arrive where Mana had lost her life. There, Toka would begin to cry. If you're going to do something, do it now, Tokisaki Kurumi, the albino would say reluctantly mentally as she approached Toka and placed a hand on her shoulder. We will look for a happy ending, she would say as she distorted again, and a few seconds later Kurumi was the one behind Toka, now wearing a new astral dress as well as a new hairstyle. Toka, if you're still there, I promise I'll seek the happy ending we deserve, no matter what experiences I have to live, I'll endure it all for the sake of my little sister, she would say lovingly, but the only thing she would receive was Toka putting a hand on hers. Without wasting any more time, Kurumi would use Zafkiel's power to go back in time, again and again to overcome the challenges, although with each trip she makes her mind is affected, and so 100 returns in time would pass. Once again, Kurumi Tokisaki would wake up from what was already a nightmare. This time she would quickly get out of bed without waking Sawa up. After achieving this she would go to the bathroom where she would stare at herself through a mirror. Her face reflected tiredness, her mind and spirit were emaciated after living over and over again the loss of her loved ones, especially the one she is in love with and her little pride. They are none other than son Goku and his younger sister Toka. Before returning this time, she had given up, she had accepted her fate of dying alongside her loved ones, but a dying Goku had told her not to give up since she will be able to find a solution thanks to her power over time, and here she is, looking at herself in front of a mirror after Mirai. The goddess of everything who wanted to end all universes and create a new one ruled by her and her demon lords, leaving Xeno-sama and the gods of destruction behind. I'll get away from everyone, Kurumi sighed as she came out of the bathroom and took out her cell phone. I need to talk in private, she would send a message to her aunt Takamiya Mana. As soon as she left the bathroom, she dressed in her high school clothes without even making a noise so that Sawa wouldn't wake up. Then she passed by the dining room. Toka smiled when she saw her sister, but before she could even say good morning to her, Tokisaki had already left. Sister, Toka would whisper, a little sad that Tokisaki had ignored her like that. For her part, Kurumi would talk with Mana, and they would meet at a midpoint. What do you want to talk about so urgently? Kurumi, I'm leaving, I'll get away from you, I can't put you in danger again. She would say in an agitated tone. Mana, what? What the hell are you talking about? Kurumi, this is the 100th time I've gone back in time, Mirai always ends up killing everyone. Upon mentioning that name, Mana would remain silent for a few seconds, to which her niece was patient, and then Takamiya would respond, so the day that Mio was talking about is approaching. Kurumi, give the crystals to Toka's friends, they are the chosen ones, but, my sister must not find out anything, she would say in an authoritarian tone. Mana, are you sure? After all, she's just like you, she's Kurumi, I know, but Toka's kind nature is a double-edged sword. It only happened once in all these trips, but she. Mana, you don't have to tell me anything, I know about the investment, Mio told me. Kurumi, I'll leave everything to you, I'll try to keep Toka away from everything while I look for a way to end this once and for all, she would finish by cutting the call. Mana Takamiya would be worried, the end of the world as the first spirit Mio had predicted, was approaching. For her part, Kurumi would fly away aimlessly while thinking, all of this seems so unreal, it's impossible that despite all my efforts I haven't been able to achieve my happy ending, she would say to herself while she began to cry, but that word would resonate in her memory. And the image of a woman who looked a little older than her would appear in her mind at the same time that an enormous pain in her chest would accompany her. This would cause the young Tokisaki to lose her temper and fall on top of a building. Although it would not cause any disaster and would not attract attention, a strange feeling would begin to arise within her as if she were missing someone very important, while fragmented images would come to her mind, in which she saw herself with her mother Diana, with an adult son Goku and Toka, but there was also someone else, someone whose face would be blurry. What was that? Some distant memory? But, because I feel that it is such a beautiful and valuable memory, she would say, confused by her feelings, so with fear and doubt she would stand up and use her angel to be able to remember. But in doing so, everything would go dark for a few moments until after a few minutes everything would return to normal, or so she would believe, since she would not be on top of that building but she was in a strange place where the sky was adorned with her very own angel, Zafkiel, and not only that, she was also together with Lucifugus. Where am I? She would ask herself in astonishment as her gaze stopped on a woman in the distance, who was standing on the edge of a cliff looking at the starlit night sky. Seeing her, Kurumi unconsciously ran after her. It was a feeling she couldn't explain, tears fell without stopping and her heart beat 1,000 times while a fragmented image would appear in her memory. I won. They couldn't stop me, and now this multiverse is mine. And it's the first of all that exist. A huge demonic figure would exclaim as he watched everyone who tried to stop them. Some were dead, others unconscious, and others without energy with several injuries, except for one person who would be standing up ready to continue. I won't let you continue causing chaos and destruction, Mirai. A white-haired girl named Mio would say, who would direct her gaze towards her younger sister Kurumi, who was slowly standing up. This won't end like this. If necessary, I'll come back and change things as many times as necessary. Tokisaki exclaimed, barely able to stand. At this, the villain would begin to laugh like a madwoman and with arrogance because she had annihilated every being that dared to go against her. Mio would give a beautiful smile to her sister Kurumi and then tell her, there will be no need for you to continue overexerting yourself, live your life, be happy my dear sister, and take care of Toka, she would say while proudly observing the spirit of time. Kurumi would shake her head while starting to cry. Why do you say that with a sad tone? You are the most powerful of all. Finish off that monster and let's live our happy ending once and for all, sister, she would say this last thing with a dull tone. But she wouldn't be the only one. Goku would scream in pain and stand up, all his clothes were torn and he could only see with one eye. Mio. What do you think you're doing? The goddess of destruction would let out a sigh while clenching her fists and then answer him, darling. I'm sorry. I know I'm being reckless, but I will save them, you know. When I met you I never thought we would go through so many beautiful moments. I can only say thank you. Thank you for accepting the love of a goddess, she would finish and turn around and walk away in Mirai's direction while using her spirit power so that everything would then become distorted. Kurumi would increase the speed of her steps, which would make that woman turn to look at her. In doing so, Tokisaki would begin to cry even harder, but now it was out of happiness, since there she was, her beloved older sister. Oh! How was I able to forget someone so important to me, she would say to herself mentally as she extended her arm to touch her sister's hand, which Mio would also do, but in doing so, as soon as Kurumi touched a finger on Mio's hand, she vanished as if she were sand and would be lost. Sister! Kurumi would exclaim with a heartrending scream. The spirit would reappear over that building. It had already gotten dark and it would be raining, so she would be all soaked, but she would simply stare at the sky while the drops fell on her face. Sister, dash. After going back in time so many times, Kurumi felt like it was taking its toll on her. It had been consuming her for a while, especially the darkness inside her, but after this experience, Kurumi ended up being completely consumed. A few days later the demon ladies would arrive. Son Goku and the spirits would go to confront them, but they would fall. It would be then that Kurumi would arrive, but now she would have a horrifying appearance. She had become a monster, and as such, she did not take long to annihilate the demon ladies and then focus her gaze on the spirits and the scion who were recovering. When he launched an attack on them, golden lights would appear from the sky, which would attract everyone's attention. Later, a gigantic entity would arrive on Earth, which gradually decreased in size. Everyone would be speechless upon seeing that being, since he had a divine and intimidating aura. Kurumi, you don't have to suffer anymore, I've come for you, Mio would say, who by sacrificing herself had become everything, who would then look sideways at the scion but would feel a pain in her abdomen. The time spirit had pierced her sister with a special crystal and would begin to absorb her powers. Kurumi, but why? Mio would ask in astonishment while feeling an enormous pain throughout her body that she couldn't stop. Tokisaki was regaining her appearance, and with a macabre smile she would answer, I knew you would become defenseless before me. Don't get me wrong, I'm doing this for all of us. It's time for our fucking happy ending. Let me show you how to use this power. She would exclaim. Kurumi no. Mio would exclaim, but everything would be distorted and the world would be rewritten once again. It was a Friday morning, the weather was pleasant. Kurumi was combing her hair in her room, while a few inches away from her was Toka eating kanako bread while waiting for her sister to go to breakfast. Has Mana already left for work? I would ask curiously. To which the purple-haired girl would shrug her shoulders. Just at that moment someone would appear at the door. Hey you two, how long will you be here? Breakfast is ready. Kurumi has an exam today. I hope you have studied, she would say, and then focus her gaze on the purple-haired girl. Toka, couldn't you wait 5 more minutes? She would say it for the bread, but then she would tell them, come on, I don't want breakfast to get cold. She would finish with a beautiful smile. To which the pair of sisters would nod, we will go immediately, Mio Wani-sama. They would both exclaim and go behind their sister. When they arrived at the living room they would begin to eat breakfast while watching television, since a kind of giant monster had appeared on the coasts of the United States. So the spirits would be fighting against it. And Goku Ani-isama? Toka would ask curiously. To which Mio would respond, Goku went to take more provisions to Broly and his friends. Oh, and in the afternoon Mrs. Jine will come to visit, so Toka you must control yourself and not eat all the food, dash. Toka would nod while playing with her fingers, I'll try, dash. Kurumi watched everything with a beautiful smile, something that wouldn't go unnoticed by her older sister. They were the only ones aware of everything that had happened and all the difficulties they had to endure to reach this moment of happiness. They had finally achieved their happy ending.